Hopefully you're in the right place. This is the Read by Florence Neighborhood Literacy Fund information session. This is for round three. Um, and for today, we have some topics I want to go over, but you already know a little bit about the Neighborhood Literacy Fund. That's what brought you here. But today's info session is going to cover exactly what it is, application requirements, the nuts and bolts of how to apply, the selection process, and expectations for reporting. And we'll be sharing some of our favorite literary local resources for local literacy change makers. We want you to leave today's session feeling more confident about submitting an application and also like you have a few more tools to support young readers in your life. If you have any questions about any of these topics, you're in the right place. Feel free to put questions in the chat and know that we'll have time to answer any we haven't covered at the end of the presentation. So, what is the Neighborhood Literacy Fund? The Neighborhood Literacy Fund supports community driven solutions to the early literacy crisis by awarding up to $2,000 for projects that help grow Philadelphia's young readers. The Neighborhood Literacy Fund is managed by Read by Fourth, Philly's early literacy movement. If you're not yet familiar, and I do see some familiar faces in the crowd, we are a citywide coalition of many partners working together all over Philadelphia to protect every child's right to read. We have a great group of partners who've helped develop the Neighborhood Literacy Fund and who have provided input on all the information we'll be sharing with you today. The selection committee that will review the applications is entirely Read by Forest partners as well. So me and Abby here actually aren't the people that select the projects. That's done by a group of Read by Forest partners that come together and help decide what the best project is. And so the Neighborhood Literacy Fund was established with the support from Vanguard Strong Start for Kids. And for round three, we're excited to welcome the Vert Field of Interest Fund, administered by the Philadelphia Foundation as an additional supporter. So we know the best solution for the community come from within. One of Philadelphia's greatest strength is our culture of mutual aid, grassroots leadership, and scrappy can-do energy that propels so much of the positive change in the city. But right now, many funding streams are not designed to support grassroots efforts, which is why we're so excited about this opportunity to support community-driven solutions to the early literacy crisis. Um, This statistic is always very, sort of sobering for me, that right now over 65% of Philly's children are not reading at grade level by the time they reach 4th grade, setting them up to feel lost, ashamed, and fall even further behind, and COVID has only made things more challenging. This is an unacceptable number, is more than a statistic. That number represents thousands of children of who are less likely to graduate high school, who often grow up struggling to fill out job applications, who are shut out from learning and experiencing of text and have one less tool for expressing themselves. So this is why this is such an incredibly important project that I'm always very excited to talk more about. But we can change this. In fact, we already are. Across the city, there are so many reasons to be optimistic. Schools are shifting how they teach reading, advocates are fighting for fair funding for schools and libraries, partners are expanding access to resources like books and tutoring, and new policies are being passed to support literacy outcomes. Thousands have joined Philly's early literacy movement, and the community has been at the front since day one. So this is a little bit about what we're looking for. Neighborhood Literacy Fund is looking for a successful applicant. So that means that they support the development of young readers and their families. Because as we said before, reading is the key to the life our children deserve, as well as engage and learn from unique community-driven solutions. No two readers and no two communities are alike. You know what works best for your community, and we want to learn from you. And we want to give money to social change makers who have limited access to funding. So you want to invest in the people who are doing this work. So this is like exactly, we're going to talk more about the rubric, but this is kind of the core idea that we're trying to get at for what we're looking for a great project. So the Neighborhood Literacy Fund is open to everyone. Great ideas can come from anywhere. It was important for us that this fund be open to anyone, teachers, block captains, big brothers, librarians, caring aunties, anyone who wants to help our children with reading. For anyone here who may be a part of the library, the only restriction is that applicants cannot work at the Free Library of Philadelphia Foundation, since that is the organization awarding the funds. But you can apply if you work for the library as a city employee or as part of a friends group. If you have any questions about eligibility, please check out the FAQ portion of our website. So just to sort of really highlight that, so if you work for the library in the branches, you're probably fine. Um, if you're a city employee in general, you probably can apply. You can probably can apply. The only people are the people that work for the foundation of the library. So if you're unsure about where you work, you probably don't work for the foundation. I think those people would have a pretty clear idea of, oh, that's me. So if you have any real serious questions about that, feel free to email me and I can maybe help you, near Abby. And we'll put our emails are in the slides, but I'll also put my email in the in the chat. So the main requirement is that projects must support the literacy development of children in Philadelphia, specifically for ages 0 to 9 or families or educators of children's ages 0 to 9. Um, and this is what our selection committee will be looking for. So I encourage you to think about each of these as you prepare your application. In a moment, we'll talk through these in more detail as we look at how they show up on the application itself. Number one, as we just described, the committee will be looking for a clear vision of how your project will support early literacy. Number two, we'll ask about your community connections. We're looking for applicants from community members and organizations with community relationships that are genuine and deep. Number three, we're looking for limited access to traditional grant funds. That is why we ask about your organization's annual budget size and how much support you receive for the project already. Number four, our planning team decided to award some additional points on our rubric to projects based in North Philly, West Philly, and Southwest, because those are the areas of greatest need when looking at current literacy outcomes. But if you're based in another part of the city, you are absolutely encouraged to apply as well. Just to give you a sense of the past numbers, in the last two rounds, about 69% of applicants were from those selected zip codes, and about 74% of projects selected were in those zip codes. So it is entirely possible for you to still be awarded funds if you are not in those areas or you don't service those areas. And don't feel like you have to be in those areas. We just want to encourage the places with um, the most need to get those, to have the most impact on those outcomes. And so also what are we looking for? So this is the scoring rubric breakdown. This is what the selection committee is using to grade each one of your applications if you submit it. So here is a more specific breakdown how these elements are weighted on our scoring rubric. We'll just take a moment to walk through how these criteria relate to what you'll see on the application. We mentioned earlier the scoring preference for applicants from North, West, and Southwest. As you can see in yellow, that's a possible bump of 6% on the rubric. So can be game changing, but if you have a fantastic application and it's not in that area, there's lots of different points that you can still collect. The next section in orange is limited access to grant funds. You'll see You'll see questions on the application asking your organization budget and past support. If your organization has a smaller budget, has not received many grants before, this is the section where you will do well. If you received lots of money in the past, you won't score as highly here. The categories in blue are about your project itself. Do make a clear case for how your project will increase literacy skills. Do you describe your connection with the community? Is your timeline realistic? That's where all that comes in. Last in green is the budget. The biggest mistake people make here is forgetting to include it. Just make sure it's complete and well thought out, and you'll do fine here. One change in the application this time is that before you request excuse me, before you could request any amount up to $2,000. This time there'll be a drop down asking you to choose increments of $500. So you can choose $500, $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000. Um, so what is not on the rubric, which will mean it will not affect your score, is that the amount that you request. Did you apply previously? Did you receive an award previously? Are you already a right for a partner? Are you a reading captain? So you may see this on the application, but um, many of these questions are just a way for us to make sure that we're getting out to the people that we want to get out to. And if we're not, how we can maybe go back and make sure we're getting out to those sort of people. And if you've been previously awarded, there are several people that have been awarded several times. There's people that have applied multiple times and been awarded. So that is not a deterrent at all. It is just something that doesn't affect your chance of winning at all. So from here, I'm going to pass it over to my co-host Abby.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. So I'll pick things up here for the second half of our presentation. As Lauren shared earlier, something really important to the selection committee that we ask everyone to think about is how exactly is your proposed project going to advance specific literacy skills? And so this is a slide that those of you who have come to our meetings before might recognize because we've started to use it more and more lately. But it's an overview of what are all of the skills that children need to develop at different ages along the way to becoming strong readers and writers. And the way that you'll see this show up on the application is there will be a question asking which of the literacy skills listed here your project is designed to support, and you can check as many as apply. And then there will be a text box where we'll just ask you for you to give us an explanation of how exactly the project that you've imagined is going to advance those skills. So we want to spend a few minutes kind of digging into this, talking through a little bit of explanation of what each of these skills looks like, along with links where you can learn more. And we'll use that as a way to give you some examples of some of the past projects that were recently funded. Before we do that, I'm going to really quickly put some links in the chat for you that you can also go ahead and use to learn more about all of the skills as we're walking through them.
I've got the links already in the chat.
Oh,
Oh, you did.
beat me to it. All right, thank you. So first, let's start in this all ages category. So if you are talking about a little baby or a third grader or anywhere in between, something that we always want to see is kids having access to learning new things and learning new words, right? Vocabulary goes and background knowledge really, really go hand in hand and are both super important to their reading comprehension that is going to happen later. Sometimes when we talk about what it takes to learn to read, we spend a lot of time thinking about how children sound out the words that are in front of them on the page. And that's super important. But once they're able to sound out the words, they also have to understand what those words mean, right? So that it comes to life and it means something for them. There's a really famous study that was done some time ago that looked at how well children comprehend a text when they're familiar with the topic or when they're not. And they gave kids passages about baseball. And even though their reading levels were all comparable, the kids who knew a lot about baseball already scored much higher and looked like they had much better reading comprehension compared with the kids that were equally skilled readers, but like myself, didn't really have that background knowledge to bring to what they were reading about baseball that day. And so everything that we can do to build up kids' access to vocabulary and background knowledge is going to help them become a strong reader and writer later on. And so the project that we wanted to highlight here was from round one. Winner named Adrian Habdi planned a really fantastic STEAM event. And you can see from the pictures that the kids had a lot of fun doing science experiments, and it was super messy with squishy slime that they were building and really interactive. I love this photo here of they were generating gases somehow by mixing things together and blew up the balloons. The kids were having a blast. But something that we loved about the project was that Adrienne, in planning it, was not just thinking about what would be really fun, but she was also super intentional thinking through, like, what are the vocabulary words and what are the science concepts that I want kids to come away with from this experience? And so it was really thoughtful and really well executed. You can go on to the next. Also, still in this all ages category, we have attention and motivation. And we know that kids will read more often when they're excited about what they're reading. And here's an example that we loved from round two. Here's an article that we grabbed recently from the Inquirer. You might have read about the Jenks Dads on Duty, an awesome parent group at Jenks Academy in Chestnut Hill. But for this project, the Friends of J.S. Jenks partnered with the Jenks Dads on Duty to plan a book club for their second and third grade boys. And they worked with book selectors from Uncle Bobby's Books in Germantown to purchase books that they thought the kids would like. And then they had a pizza party lunch, and the students that participated also received gift cards so they could go back to Uncle Bobby's with their gift cards and purchase books that they wanted for their home library. So thinking about, like, how does this build attention and motivation? There were the relationships that the kids were developing with the dads as reading mentors. They had access to culturally relevant books. There were the incentives like the pizza party. And it was also just a really fun experience that they created around books. So we loved that example for attention and motivation. Moving to the ages 0 to 2 bracket, we have a photo of one of our past awardees, John Butler, along with his own little cutie pie there, who's just learning how to turn the pages. But at 0 to 2, what we really want to see is working on oral language skills. And oral language skills actually continue to develop as children grow. But what it looks like at 0 to 2 is when we see kids just babbling and talking and singing, they're actually beginning to learn about the patterns of language. And all of that lays the foundation for the vocabulary that they'll be developing later on as they age. And we also want to expose little ones to print so that they're learning things like how to hold the book upright and how to turn the pages and all of that stuff that's foundational before they're ready to start to learn to read independently. And so when we get to ages 3 to 5, we're now in the pre-kindergarten stage. And one thing we want to see is kids starting to learn the alphabet. And so this is a little bit more than just singing the ABCs, although that's a great place where many families choose to start. But we often say that learning the ABCs takes all three, takes letter names, letter shapes, and letter sounds. So we want to be able to recognize the letters when they show up out of context, when they show up out of order, not just reading them in order when they're written down. And we want to start to match each of the letters to the sounds that they make. And so shown in the picture here is one of our awardees from both the first and second round, held a series of early learning circles twice a week for Latino families in Southwest Philadelphia who were newly arrived to the United States and had children ages 2 to 5. And her sessions were really comprehensive. She did a lot to help families access early learning resources. But one of the activities she told us about in her final report that was so fun was she gave the kids clay and I think maybe also sand and hid a bunch of letters, like plastic letters. And the kids had to go on a treasure hunt to dig through the clay and dig through the sand and find the letter. But then she reinforced the letter name and the letter sound. So as they found each of these letter treasures, she would talk about the name and the sound and a word that starts with that letter sound as well. So then going to ages 6 to 9, or what we usually think of as kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, this is where we really start to develop phonics skills, where I have knowledge of the letters and I can apply that knowledge to sound out the word. Closely related to that is phonemic awareness, or being able to hear the individual sounds within words. So imagine what that looks like when I'm learning to spell a word like cat. You can stretch out the word, You can hear it, cat. You recognize what letter goes with each of those sounds, and you can write it down. And fluency is when you begin to read smoothly and confidently. You're not stumbling along, sounding everything out as you go. It just flows and it sounds really natural. And you develop fluency by having lots of practice reading those letters and sound combinations repeatedly. So, an example from last round was a project from Southwark School. They purchased decodable books that first and second grade students could use to practice the phonics skills that they were learning in the classroom. They also hosted family nights to provide parents and caregivers with information and tips on how children could continue practicing and building their fluency at home. And then finally, where all of these skills come together is being able to understand what you're reading or comprehension, and being able to write and tell your own stories as well. So there was a really interdisciplinary project example we wanted to share from the second round. The Free Library of Philadelphia Cecil B. Moore location partnered with a storyteller named Mama Carla Wiley, who did a really cool interdisciplinary oral storytelling art project. She did interactive read alouds with the families that attended. The kids got to practice telling their own stories, both in writing and out loud. And then they created art pieces that were quilt squares that are now all put together and on display at the library branch. So when kids come back to the library forever after, they have this memory of the learning experience that they had thanks to this project. So I feel like I just talked a lot running through our primer of all the early literacy skills, but the point was to give you examples of some of the exciting projects that partners have put together in the past, and also just to start getting you thinking. If you want to look back at that skills framework, you can find it on the website in the resources section, and I can see Lauren just put it there in the notes. So switching gears now to walk through some of the logistics of how to apply. What you'll do is you'll go to this link that Lauren just put in the chat that opens up the website. Lots of resources here if you want to read more about past projects or browse any of the resources that are listed. But to start your application, you just want to scroll until you see those 4 boxes and click on the purple one that says apply. That will open a new page in our application platform. On that page, you will then scroll down a little bit until you find a section that looks like this and it says register. And register is how you start your application. The choice it's asking you to make here is just whether you're starting your application in English or in Spanish. You put the number 1 next to whichever one you choose and click register. At that point, the website will redirect you into your application, and it will also send you an email that has a link that you will use to get back to your application and edit it later. And so overall, the application is meant to be pretty straightforward. And if you ever find that to not be the case, please reach out to me and Lauren, and we're happy to help you. But the one question Lauren mentioned as being a little bit tricky for folks in the past was the budget. And so that's why we pulled out that one here with the screenshot so we can show you what to expect. What we're asking for is a brief explanation of your project budget in the text box. So for example, if you decide that you need $2,000 to implement your project successfully, write a few sentences here describing what you would spend that $2,000 on, right? The second thing that we're asking for is an attachment, which is your budget document. And you can see the gray box there is where you'll attach that. That is just the same information, but in a list format. You'll list each of the things that you expect to purchase, and you would upload it. It doesn't have to be super detailed. You know, I mentioned one of the projects I mentioned earlier was purchasing books from Uncle Bobby's, for example. They just said that they were going to spend X amount on books. You don't have to list every single title unless for some reason the specific title is really integral to your project. There is a link here to a template that you can use if you find it helpful, but you can also use your own format. Some people have even like handwritten their budget and taken a picture of it and attached the picture. That is fine too. If any of this is tricky or you just somewhat want someone to get on a Zoom with you for a couple minutes to confirm that you're all set, that would be a great reason to sign up for office hours or send me and Lauren an email and we can set up a Zoom like this with screen sharing so we can just look at it together and make sure that you're all squared away. So as I just said, if you have any questions, please do take advantage of the office hours that are posted on our website. We can help you with the budget. We can give feedback on a draft. If you're still thinking through what your project is going to be, we can help you kind of brainstorm around what the selection committee is looking for, whatever you need. There are some pre-scheduled times available on the calendar link, but if those times don't work for you, or if you want someone to request an appointment in Spanish, just send us an email directly and Lauren and I will set up whatever it is that you need us to do. A few application tips. One, this is not going to auto save your work like Google Docs. So you do have to click on the save as draft periodically before you close out to make sure that you don't lose your work before you're ready to hit submit. The second tip we wanted to share is just to remember to share details. This one I always have mixed feelings about saying because on the one hand, we don't want you to spend a long, long time on your application, right? We want it to be quick and easy and painless. But we also have seen how applications are scored, and we know that it's helpful when you include details about what you're planning to do. That tends to help you in the scoring process. I've also seen examples of people kind of forget to brag about themselves. So if you know about yourself that you're a little shy or you don't feel comfortable like screaming to the rooftops about how awesome you are and how much experience you have and what your track record is, right, is like that could be a great reason to ask a friend to look over the application for you before you submit, just to make sure that you're remembering all the great things that you should be saying about yourself and telling the selection committee. Last, if you want more tips about proposal writing, there is a link to a pre-recorded presentation from the first round that's available on our website. And you can find it at the link that Lauren shared previously. So here are a few key dates to keep in mind. The application deadline is Friday, April 19th. We don't expect or want anybody working on it late in the evening, but just in case you do find yourself having a late night, it is going to close out at 11:59 p.m. on April 19th. That's the hard deadline. And we are going to notify you about the selection committee's decision by May 31st. A question that came up last time was when projects should take place. And so I want to mention that here too. I would recommend planning for your project to take place roughly between July and December. That's because suppose we let you know on May 31st that you're accepted. There's a piece of paperwork that we'll need you to fill out, letting us know essentially where to send the check to. Suppose it takes you a week or two to get that back to us. And then it takes us a month for the check to work its way through the mail system to you. Comfortably, I would plan for your money to be in hand by early July. After that, you have 6 months to complete your project before we ask for final reports. And so that's where the July to December timeframe comes in. So the main thing that we'll ask you if you are selected May 31st is how you want to be paid. Lauren can walk you through more details if that comes to pass. But essentially your options are to get a check in the mail or to use Zelle for direct deposit. That will depend on whether or not your bank accepts Zelle. So you'll just have to ask them about that. If it is an option, we highly recommend it because you will get your money more quickly. If you are funded for either $500 or $1,000, you will receive 100% of that money upfront. And that is because we really want to avoid people having to spend out of pocket and waiting to get reimbursed later because we know that that can be hard. If you are funded at one of the larger amounts at $1,500 or $2,000, your first check will be for 75% of the total, and we'll need to hold back the final 25% until after we receive your final report, just letting us know that your project is completed. If you are planning to apply as an individual, like just you on your own, not affiliated with an organization or a fiscal sponsor or a partner, anything like that, just you doing your own thing. The one thing to be really careful about is that there are tax requirements that if you're paid over $600, that would show up on your personal income tax statements at the end of the year, and it would look like income, and it could affect your benefits, your tax liabilities. And so we do warn people to be really careful about that. If you want to apply for one of the higher dollar amounts as an individual, we'd want you to think hard about connecting with a fiscal sponsor, and we could try to help you find one if needed. Um, or just be super aware of what the tax implications would be for you. And there is more information about that on the FAQ section of the website as well. So just a bit more about the final report so you know what to expect. At the end of your project, we will ask you to answer 2 questions. The 2 questions are number 1, overall, did your project meet your goals? Tell us a little bit about why or why not. And number 2, we'd like your advice to help us prepare for the next round. What was helpful? What can we improve? And you have a few choices of how to answer these questions for us. Most people choose to just send us an email telling us what they think. A couple people have chosen to record a video on their phone and send us the video. Or a few people have also chosen to schedule a phone call or a Zoom meeting, and we can just have a conversation about your experience answering those 2 questions. And so our next to last slide here is our list of resources. If you want to learn more about early literacy efforts that are happening in the city or projects or resources particular to your application, really encourage you to check out these links and poke around the Read by Fourth website as there's a ton of information there. And lastly, Lauren and I can put our email address in the chat unless Lauren already beat me to it, but we do really love to hear from people about their projects. And we really mean it when we say, please contact us. We want to hear your questions. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing already. And we appreciate the time that you're taking tonight during dinner time to be with us and learn more about this opportunity to work together.